Can you tell us then, since the July elections, you've been in post now 12 months, how many planning permissions have been granted in the last 12 months for social homes, and how many of those social homes have started construction on site since you've been Deputy Prime Minister? And Deputy Prime Minister, so you've said you do what you say. So can you tell us then, since the July elections, you've been in post now 12 months, how many planning permissions have been granted in the last 12 months for social homes, and how many of those social homes have started construction on site since you've been Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, I can't give you the granular detail of every single planning application, but what I can tell you is that we're monitoring what happens. I've done a number of call-ins. My department set up a specialist group that will help New Homes Accelerator. We are supporting councils with their negotiations on 106 notices to get more social and affordable homes as part of development. So we are looking at where the problems are with getting these houses and mixed tenure off the ground and are really pushing them. So we've already unlocked thousands of homes that the previous government wasn't able to deliver. But I can't give you the granite detail of every single planning application that we've had over 12 months.
You just said you were tracking it. So if you're tracking it, surely you should be able to say over the last 12 months we've granted planning permission for 10,000 houses and 4,000 have started on site. So you can't be tracking it if you haven't got those figures.
Is it worth me coming in here just to say, obviously we track overall planning permissions, but those are all granted at local level, so we can definitely look at kind of whether we can specify exactly how those break down between types of housing.
That's something you could probably write to us as a committee about.
I think it's probably worth saying, you know, even in a situation where considering all of the different reforms that we've put into place, we wouldn't necessarily expect to see those filtering through in those numbers quite yet. And I think that goes back to what the Chair said at the beginning about housing starts and the fact that housing starts are still lagging behind where we would want them to be. But that is because there is considerable lead time between the time of making these policy changes and actually seeing both planning permissions and housing starts following through.
Planning permissions are up 6%. That is something that we've already seen between January and March of 2025. Planning applications were up 6% from the same quarter last year. So that is sort of like the first indication of dealing with what was an inheritance of housing and applications going off a cliff, basically, under the previous government, of some of the reforms we've introduced. Well, it is true. I mean, the statistics were really clear, and we're turning that around now, and we're starting to see that planning applications are going through. The planning infrastructure bill, which is still not, you know, it's still in Parliament at the moment. They have some good reforms in there that will help planning applications as well, and we'll get those starts. I've talked about the New Homes Accelerator, which we've unblocked thousands of homes that were stuck in the system. The issues around neutrality, the issues around making sure that the infrastructure like reservoir and water is there. These things were not even in the pipeline under the previous government, and we've started to grasp that nettle through the reforms that we're making, including telling local authorities we're bringing back mandatory housing targets, which the previous government didn't do. We'll start to make sure that there is a real important carrot and stick for people to say we have to have these homes. And I think, in fairness, the government said this in opposition. We were elected on a mandate to do it, and people understand it. But going back to my previous point that I made before, and the tension is that they gave me a mandate to build the houses, but they said quite categorically that they wanted input, and that's why mandatory housing targets are important, because then they have to consult on that with local people, but they want the infrastructure within that as well, and I think that's the big challenge, and that's what we're delivering.
In the planning and infrastructure bill makes infrastructure first, makes the roads come first, makes the doctors' surgeries come first, makes the schools come first, because I couldn't find it. So can you tell us, as Secretary of State, then, what in the planning and infrastructure bill makes infrastructure on development come first?
Well, first of all, the stuff, it's not the planning infrastructure. The infrastructure in the planning infrastructure bill is things like the nature recovery and dealing with things like nutrient neutrality and around streamlining planning. So planning applications, they can focus on the more contentious areas where you do need to then thrash out, as part of the planning process, the critical infrastructure that is needed. The role that we're playing across government through national infrastructure as well, and working with other departments, is about if there is a school or a hospital or roads homes. We're already investing in transport, significant amount of investment in transport that the previous government didn't do. And that is around making sure that if we're planning new towns, for example, or we're doing significant amounts of housing in an area, that infrastructure comes as part of that programme. Now that takes time to do. I'm not going to have been able to do that in 12 months, you can appreciate that, but we're already doing that work, and we're already holding developers to account, which again the previous government didn't have a way of doing that, which at the moment people were frustrated that developers would come back after agreeing a programme of infrastructure and then say, well, we can't deliver that. And we're already now holding them to account to say, you've promised that as part of the development, we're going to make sure that happens, and we're supporting local authorities in making sure they do that, because that's the buy-in that you'll get from the public with this. They know we need the houses, but they say we want to have a say in where they are, and we want to make sure the infrastructure is there as part of that. And I am absolutely clear on that mandate being caveated on those two conditions.
Okay, well.
Thank you, Chairman. Deputy Prime Minister, I do welcome the £39 billion investment in affordable and social housing, but given in my constituency of Woking, and actually the Chairman's constituency, it costs at least £200,000 to build a home in the UK. That's roughly 300 affordable homes in the country across each constituency. That's clearly not enough to meet the demand. Why has the government gone for the £39 billion figure? Is it what you genuinely think you can afford rather than what we as a country need?
Well, the country will need way more than what we can give them in terms of housing, but there again, being able to have the construction, to have the facilities to enable to get us to that place is a fine balance. One of the things that has been said to me, relax 106 notices and people can build, and it's, well, no, we need to build communities, so you've got to have the infrastructure in place. That takes time, so that's a figure and the amount we've got, which I believe will be able to create not just houses, but homes and communities, which are incredibly important as part of that. And also, like I said before, challenging the private rental sector as well with the measures we're taking in the Renters' Rights Bill to protect those renters at the moment, which I don't feel the protection has been there for them, which has left them feeling even more vulnerable. So I think that this will make a huge impact. But we have to remember the reason we've got into this mess is for over a decade and a half, we haven't grasped the nettle on this issue. We haven't dealt with the long-term problems of the housing crisis, and we are starting to turn that around. And I think there has been a national conversation about this now, because I don't think there's a family in this country that doesn't know somebody in their family that have got a housing need that isn't being met. And we are working to deliver that, whether that's through the additional money we're putting into skills. We've got an industrial strategy and a skills strategy, which is identifying where we've got skills gaps so we can produce the infrastructure and the homes we need going forward on the government's programme, but also about how we not only get the money for investment in housing, but how we bring that about, whether that's through the National Housing Bank, through financial tractions, through the Affordable Homes programme, through the rent convergence. There's so many different elements, the mandatory housing targets for local authorities that we've brought back in so that they are planning where the housing and infrastructure needs to be in their communities. There's a lot of moving parts that we've grasped the nettle in the first 12 months to say we're going to do it. And I think if you speak to people in the sector, whether that's from homelessness all the way through to developers, they will say they will welcome the changes that we're making. Even local authorities who are concerned about their mandatory targets have recognised that we need to do something because we haven't.
Our curtain rises with the ever-brave committee members gathered, pens ready, brows tight, prepared to do the unthinkable, ask a simple question. The hero of the moment, Lewis, calm, polite, with a voice smoother than Earl Grey steeped for exactly 4 minutes. He begins with the innocence of a man unaware of the chaos he's about to spark. Deputy Prime Minister, how many planning permissions for social homes have been granted in the last 12 months? And how many have actually started construction? Oh Lewis, you sweet summer child. The lights dim, the room holds its breath, and here she comes, Angela Rayner. Escape artist of responsibility, master of word salads, thrower of buzzwords like she's feeding pigeons in Trafalgar Square. Well, she begins, already spinning with the grace of a ballerina mid-turn. I can't give you the fine detail of every single planning application, but what I can tell you is that we're monitoring what happens. Ah yes, monitoring. Like a hawk. A hawk with no eyes, no memory, and possibly no beak. But wait, she's only warming up. We've set up a specialist group, she declares. The New Homes Accelerator. Cue the audience gasp. A group with a grand name. Who needs numbers when we have a task force? She charges forward like a runaway train powered by committee notes. We're supporting councils with their negotiations on 106 notices. That's section 106 for those of you playing civil servant bingo at home. But Lewis, glorious persistent Lewis, isn't letting go. You just said you're tracking it, so if you're tracking it, you must know the numbers. And here we witness Angela's true art, semantic gymnastics. You've never seen bobbing and weaving like this outside the Olympic trampoline finals. Well, we track overall permissions, yes, but they're granted at the local level. We'll probably write to you, or think about maybe looking into possibly writing something, at some point, potentially. Ladies and gentlemen, the dance of the deflection. You half expect her to start humming the theme from Yes, Minister. Then, like a perfectly timed punchline in a Monty Python sketch, someone from her team jumps in, clearly telepathically signaled through the government panic button. They explain, we wouldn't expect those reforms to show effects yet. You know, because apparently a year just isn't enough time to count things. Planning applications are up 6%. Angela cries, triumphant. Between January and March. That's it. We've cracked it. 3 months of vague improvement. Everyone go home. But no, she's flying now into a crescendo of civil service poetry. We're turning it around now. We've started to see, the planning applications going through the planning infrastructure bill today. Which, by the way, isn't a bill yet, but it's becoming one. Like a Pokemon evolving into its final form. What about infrastructure? Someone asks. You know, roads, schools, hospitals. She nods solemnly. We're grasping the nettle, she announces. Which must be code for doing almost nothing while looking busy. And when asked specifically what the bill says to make infrastructure come first, her reply is, well, first of all, the stuff. Yes, viewers. The stuff. A bold new chapter in British politics. Forget policies or laws, it's just the stuff. She mentions nutrient neutrality, which sounds like either a health shake or a Minecraft potion, but no, it's about water and sewage. Essential, if you prefer homes that don't smell like a Victorian saw. Then comes the pièce de résistance. We're holding developers to account, she declares. After decades of letting them run wild, now they'll be stopped with a polite frown and maybe a stern email. And just when you think it can't get any more absurd, one member, fighting to stay awake, asks about the £39 billion set aside for affordable homes. That's only enough for 300 per constituency, he points out. Why that figure? Angela responds with an answer worthy of display in the Museum of Political Rhetoric. Well, the country needs more, but we can only do what we can. It takes time. Construction is tricky. We want homes, not just houses. We're challenging the private rental sector. And something, renters' rights bill. Bravo! A full-blooded monologue of vague intentions. Shakespeare himself would be crying into his ruff. To be fair, she makes one excellent point, there isn't a family in the country that doesn't know someone struggling with housing. Which is exactly why we want to know how many homes have actually started being built. But no, instead we get a storm of phrases. Industrial strategy. Skills strategy. Financial traction. National Housing Bank. Rent convergence. A blizzard of words so heavy you could insulate one of the affordable homes we're still waiting for with them. And so, before this fever dream drifts away like so many unfinished projects, let's reflect. Angela Rayner, like a magician mid-trick, took a simple question, how many homes have started? And turned it into a TED talk on everything but that. Is she evasive? Absolutely. Confusing? Without a doubt. But in her own chaotic, backflipping, buzzword-throwing way, she's given us something priceless, entertainment. Pure British bureaucratic theatre. So next time you're stuck in a housing crisis, waiting for infrastructure, or wondering where your tax pounds went, remember this. We've got the New Homes Accelerator. We've got the stuff. And we've got Angela, bravely not answering questions since, well, forever. God save the Queen. Oh wait, carry on, committee. You're doing the Lord's work. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more political pantomimes. And as always, thank you for joining us on this gloriously baffling journey through the magical maze of modern governance. Cheerio, and mind the granular details on your way out.